first, with the death being announced of the former England and Leeds footballer Norman Hunter. He had contracted the coronavirus.
Norman sadly missed his teammates. He was a great man, Norman.
On April 17, 2020, the football world lost Norman Hunter at age 76. COVID-19 took him down. Former England striker Gary Lineker captured the sad truth perfectly. He said the awful virus was one crunching tackle too far. Tributes flooded in immediately. Johnny Giles, his old teammate, called him one of the most humble people you could ever meet. Eddie Gray said he was a truly great football player. But here's the thing about this humble man. He was also one of the most feared defenders in history. His brutal, robust playing style made grown men nervous. He earned the famous nickname, Bites Your Legs. And that tells you everything. This was a player who thrived on conflict. Today, we're looking at 5 players Norman Hunter absolutely hated. Let's talk about that nickname first. Bites Your Legs didn't come from some journalist looking for a headline. It came from the Leeds fans themselves. They made a banner in 1968 at the League Cup final. The Ellen Road faithful celebrated it. They loved what it said about their man. Hunter was the enforcer in Don Revie's ruthless, disciplined Leeds side. That team was packed with hard men, but Hunter stood out. He was part of a trinity of enforcers that defined the era. Chelsea had Ron Chopper Harris, Liverpool had Tommy Anfield Iron Smith, and Leeds had Norman Hunter. He was one of the most feared defenders of his generation, period. Hunter built a reputation on pure physical intimidation. That defined his entire era. It makes you wonder, could a player with a nickname like Bites Your Legs even last 10 minutes in today's game with VAR? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this look back at football's toughest generation, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video. Now, let's get into the 5 players Hunter had real problems with. These weren't just tough matches, these were personal feuds. First up, Francis Lee from Derby County. This clash stands as one of the most infamous moments in English football history. November 1st, 1975, at Derby's baseball ground. The tension had been building for years. Lee had a reputation for diving. He won penalties all the time. They called him Lee One Pen. Even Hunter admitted Lee was brilliant at it. In the first half, Lee went down under a challenge from Hunter. The referee pointed to the spot. Penalty. You could feel the anger building. Then came the explosion. Second half, off the ball, Hunter threw the first punch. A full-blown fistfight erupted right there on the pitch. They were separated, but as they walked away, they started fighting again. Both got sent off. The epic punch-up was shown on Match of the Day that night. The whole country watched it. Lee needed 4 stitches for a cut lip. Hunter got banned. This was violence, pure and simple. It defined an era when players settled scores with their fists. Years later, the two eventually made peace. But that moment captured exactly who Hunter was on the pitch. He didn't back down from anyone, and when someone pushed him too far, he pushed back twice as hard. The fight became legendary because it wasn't some quick scuffle that the cameras missed. This was broadcast into living rooms across Britain. Kids saw it, parents saw it. Everyone had an opinion, but nobody could deny that Norman Hunter and Francis Lee genuinely couldn't stand each other in that moment. Next, Peter Osgood from Chelsea. This was a personal feud that captured something bigger. Yorkshire grit versus Flash Cockney. Reeves' Leeds were seen as cynical and tough. Doherty's Chelsea were all about flair and London fashion. Hunter himself called it a beautiful savagery. He said it was a tremendous rivalry, but make no mistake, there was real animosity here. One incident from 1970 shows how personal it got. Chelsea were winning 2-1 at Stamford Bridge. Osgood had just scored. He found Hunter on the pitch and taunted him. "Where were you for that goal, Norman?" Can you imagine? But Leeds equalised shortly after. Hunter immediately looked for Osgood. He ran over and growled at him. "Now we've got a game." Then Hunter grabbed Osgood's sideburns and pulled them hard. This wasn't football. This was a street fight in football kit. Their hatred peaked in the 1970 FA Cup final and its replay. These two matches are regarded as among the most brutal in English football history. During that ferocious replay at Old Trafford, Hunter was seen trading punches with Ian Hutchinson. The violence was everywhere. These weren't isolated incidents. This was how Hunter and his generation played the game. Rivalry between Leeds and Chelsea ran deeper than just 2 players. It represented a cultural divide. Leeds represented the industrial north, working-class values, and a willingness to win by any means necessary. Chelsea represented London glamour, Kings Road fashion, and stylish football. When these two teams met, it was more than a game. It was a statement about identity. Hunter embodied everything Leeds stood for, while Osgood was the face of Chelsea's swagger. Their clashes were inevitable and explosive. Third on the list, Denis Law from Manchester United, the War of the Roses. This was the most hostile rivalry in English football. Leeds versus Manchester United, Yorkshire versus Lancashire. Historical hatred turned into brutal clashes between Revy's Leeds and Busby's Manchester United. United had the iconic trinity, George Best, Bobby Charlton, and Denis Law. The 1965 FA Cup semi-final was described as a sordid shambles of open violence. That's not exaggeration, that's accurate. During one match, Billy Bremner and Norman Hunter paired up to fight Law and Pat Crerand. 2 against 2. Hunter was ganging up on opponents. This wasn't defending. This was warfare. The proof of their mutual hatred comes from Law himself. Someone asked him which defender he most disliked playing against. Law's answer was immediate. Bite your legs, Norman Hunter. No hesitation. One of the era's greatest strikers named Hunter as the player he hated facing most. That's the ultimate testament to how intimidating and effective Hunter's aggression was. The Leeds-Manchester United rivalry wasn't just about football. It carried centuries of regional animosity. The Wars of the Roses had been fought between Yorkshire and Lancashire in the 15th century, and that bitterness never disappeared. When Revy's Leeds faced Busby's United in the 1960s and 70s, both sets of fans believed they were fighting for regional pride. Every tackle meant something. Every goal was a victory for an entire county. Hunter understood this. When he faced Denis Law, he wasn't just marking a striker. He was defending Yorkshire's honour. That added an extra edge to every confrontation. Fourth, Ian St John from Liverpool. Leeds and Liverpool were the two dominant forces. Revie against Bill Shankly. Their matches were high stakes, physically demanding contests for league titles and cups. Ian St John was Liverpool's tough and aggressive centre-forward. The Scottish international was a natural and recurring adversary for Hunter. Their duels were pivotal battles in these famous clashes, but St John got the upper hand where it mattered most, the 1965 FA Cup final. St John scored the winning goal with a diving header in extra time, Liverpool's first ever FA Cup trophy, and it came against Hunter's Leeds. You can imagine how that ate at Hunter. Every time they faced each other after that, Hunter remembered, St John had beaten him on the biggest stage. Unlike some of the other rivalries that were based purely on animosity and violence, the Hunter versus St John battles were rooted in competitive respect. Both men were winners, both played for dominant teams, both understood what it took to succeed at the highest level. St John later revealed that he knew many of the Leeds players personally, including Big Norman Hunter. This suggests that even within the fiercest on-field battles, a community of respect existed among the era's top professionals. They could battle each other for 90 minutes and then share a drink afterwards, but during the match, neither gave an inch. Finally, Eddie McCready from Chelsea. McCready's main feud was with Johnny Giles, but McCready and Hunter were parallel figures. They were the primary enforcers for their teams. There was a special sort of animosity between the two clubs, and these two men were the key combatants whenever Leeds and Chelsea met. The 1970 FA Cup replay again. That match had breathtaking violence from start to finish. While Hunter was busy trading punches with Ian Hutchinson, McCready was delivering a kung fu-style kick to Billy Bremner's head. Think about that. This wasn't one player losing control. This was organised chaos. Multiple fights happening simultaneously. Hunter was a key participant in an all-out war. He thrived in that environment. Johnny Giles described McCready as wild, a player whose aggression was less controlled than that of his infamous teammate, Chopper Harris. When you had two teams filled with enforcers, hard men, and players willing to cross the line, matches became battles of attrition. The question wasn't whether violence would occur, but when and how much. Hunter and McCready understood their roles perfectly. They were there to protect their teammates, intimidate opponents, and establish physical dominance. The fact that both men were doing the same job for opposing teams made their encounters inevitable flashpoints. So after hearing all this violence, you have to ask the question, was Norman Hunter just a hatchet man? Was he just a thug who got lucky? Was the nickname all there was? Here's where the story changes completely. To think of Hunter as just a hard man does a profound disservice to his actual ability. The proof is impossible to ignore. In 1974, Norman Hunter was named the inaugural PFA Players Player of the Year, the very first winner of that award. Let that sink in. This wasn't voted for by journalists or fans. This was voted for by his fellow professionals, the very players who faced his crunching tackles week in and week out. They respected his footballing talent above all others. They saw past the aggression. They saw his technical skill and tactical intelligence. Eddie Gray, his teammate, praised Hunter's cultured left foot. He said Hunter could launch attacks from deep with pinpoint accuracy. The players who knew football best recognised that Hunter was far more than just an enforcer. Don Revie's famous instruction to Hunter captured his primary role perfectly. You win the ball and you give it to those who can play. That simple directive revealed Hunter's true value. Yes, he could intimidate. Yes, he could fight. But his main job was to dispossess opponents cleanly and efficiently, then start attacks. He was a brilliant reader of the game who knew exactly when to tackle and when to hold his position. His partnership with Jack Charlton lasted over a decade and provided the foundation for Leeds' success. Charlton dominated in the air, while Hunter's tenacious tackling and surprising skill on the ball created a nearly impenetrable barrier. Together, they helped Leeds win 2 First Division championships, the FA Cup, the League Cup, and 2 Intercities Fairs Cups. But the team also suffered agonising near misses, finishing as runners-up 5 times in the league and losing 3 FA Cup finals, plus the finals of the European Cup and European Cup Winners' Cup. This constant proximity to glory forged a powerful siege mentality within the squad. Hunter was always ready to fight for his teammates and his club. Norman Hunter's legacy is complex. To remember him just for the nickname is to miss the real story. Hunter himself said he was remembered for 3 things: the bites your legs nickname, the fight with Francis Lee, and a costly error he made for England against Poland in a 1973 World Cup qualifier when a rare mistake allowed Poland to score a vital equaliser that ultimately denied England a place at the 1974 finals. But his true legacy is far richer. 726 appearances for Leeds United, 21 goals, 2 First Division championships, an FA Cup, a League Cup, 2 Intercities Fairs Cups, 28 England caps, a World Cup winners' medal from 1966, the deep, enduring respect he commanded from teammates and opponents alike. That's the real Norman Hunter legacy. He was a warrior from a different age, a time when the game was more physical, when tribal loyalties meant everything, when a player could be feared on the pitch and respected off it without contradiction. The contrast between the on-field warrior and the off-field man was remarkably sharp. Peter Shilton remembered a wonderful man whose company he always enjoyed. This duality wasn't a carefully constructed facade, but a genuine reflection of his character. He was a fierce competitor who left his aggression on the pitch, a quality that earned him respect, even from those he battled against most intensely. Norman Hunter was a true warrior from a different age, and will likely never see a player quite like him again. He can't play at all. Those words might surprise you when we talk about Jack Charlton, a man who won the World Cup with England in 1966 and became Ireland's favourite Englishman. But behind the legendary status and the cheering crowds, Jack Charlton lived a life marked by bitter conflicts that lasted decades. When he died in July 2020 after battling lymphoma and dementia, 2 nations mourned him. But the story of his life wasn't just about glory on the pitch. It was about feuds that tore apart families, destroyed friendships, and divided an entire country over how football should be played. Jack Charlton was born on May 8, 1935, in Ashington, a small mining town in Northumberland. He spent his entire playing career at Leeds United, making 629 league appearances over 21 years. He won the World Cup alongside his younger brother Bobby in 1966, a moment that should have bonded them forever. Instead, it became just one chapter in a story of division that would haunt both brothers until their final days. After retiring in 1973, Jack moved into management. In 1986, he took on his biggest challenge yet. He became the first foreign manager of the Republic of Ireland national team. The Irish had talent, but no results. Jack changed that overnight. He didn't care about playing beautiful football, he wanted wins, and he got them. Under his leadership, Ireland qualified for Euro 1988, reached the quarter-finals of the 1990 World Cup, and made it to the 1994 World Cup too. The Irish people loved him. They gave him the freedom of the city of Dublin and even granted him honorary Irish citizenship. Shopkeepers refused to cash his personal cheques because they wanted to keep them as souvenirs. He was a hero to millions. But away from the adoring crowds, Jack Charlton was fighting battles on multiple fronts. His brother wouldn't speak to him. His best players hated his methods. Critics called his football ugly and said he was wasting talented players. And one of Ireland's brightest stars publicly challenged his authority and called him a bully. Before we dive deeper into these shocking feuds, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling us what you think about Jack Charlton. Was he a hero who got results, or did his conflicts show a darker side? Let us know your thoughts. The feud with his brother Bobby started long before anyone knew about it. Bobby Charlton married a woman named Norma in 1961. Norma was a strong character, and she didn't get along with their mother, Cissy Charlton. This created a terrible situation for Bobby. He loved his mother, but he loved his wife more. Bobby had to choose between them, and he chose Norma. That choice meant Bobby stopped visiting his mother. For Jack, who stayed close to his roots in Ashington, this was unforgivable. The brothers played together for England and won the World Cup together in 1966. They stood side by side as national heroes, but behind the scenes, they barely spoke. Bobby played beautiful, attacking football for Manchester United. Jack played tough defensive football for Leeds United. Their styles on the pitch mirrored their personalities off it. These differences might have been manageable, but the family split made everything worse. For over 30 years, the feud simmered quietly. Then, in 1996, their mother Cissy died. Jack had just resigned as Ireland's manager, and he was devastated by his mother's death. In his grief and anger, Jack did something that made headlines around the world. He publicly accused Bobby of neglecting their mother during her final years. He said Bobby had abandoned her and left her heartbroken. The accusation was brutal and very public. Bobby stayed silent for years, but in 2007, he finally responded in his autobiography. Bobby was furious at what Jack had said about Norma. He called Jack's claims about his wife absolutely disgraceful and complete nonsense. Bobby admitted that he and Jack had never been further apart than they were at that moment. He went even further, saying he just didn't want to know his brother anymore. These weren't private thoughts shared in confidence. These were published words that the whole world could read. Two World Cup winners, two brothers who had shared one of football's greatest moments, were now enemies. The public watched in sadness as the Charlton brothers continued their war of words. Bobby defended his choice to prioritise his wife. Jack felt Bobby had turned his back on their mother and their working-class roots. Neither would back down. Neither would apologise. The feud seemed permanent and beyond repair. But something changed in later years. Age and reflection softened both men slightly. They began to have limited contact again. The most emotional moment came at the BBC Sports Personality of the Year Awards. Jack stood on stage, clearly moved, to present Bobby with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Jack said something simple but powerful. He said, "Bobby Charlton is the greatest player I've ever seen, and he's my brother." The two men embraced, and the audience erupted in applause. It was a brief moment of healing in a relationship that had been broken for decades. In 2018, they came together again for a sad occasion. They attended the funeral of Ray Wilson, another member of England's 1966 World Cup winning team. It seemed like the brothers might finally find peace with each other. but time was running out for both of them. Jack died in July 2020. He had been suffering from both lymphoma and dementia. Just 4 months after Jack's death, Bobby received the same devastating diagnosis. He too had dementia. Bobby's health had deteriorated so much that he couldn't even attend Jack's funeral. The disease that would eventually claim Bobby had already made him too weak to say goodbye to his brother. Both men, heroes of 1966, were struck down by the same cruel illness. It was a tragic ending to a complicated relationship that had brought both brothers so much pain. The feud with Bobby was personal and private for many years, but Jack's conflicts in Ireland were very public and very loud. When he became Ireland's manager in 1986, he brought a simple philosophy: get the ball forward quickly, win headers, pressure the other team, don't worry about looking pretty, just win games. This approach worked brilliantly in terms of results. Ireland qualified for major tournaments for the first time in their history, but not everyone was happy. Eamon Dunphy was a football pundit working for Irish television. He had been a professional player himself and understood the game deeply. Dunphy watched Jack's Ireland team and hated what he saw. Along with fellow pundit Johnny Giles, Dunphy argued that Jack was wasting a golden generation of Irish talent. Players like Roy Keane, Paul McGrath, and Liam Brady were skilled enough to play beautiful technical football. Instead, Jack had them kicking long balls and chasing around like it was a Sunday League match. The tension exploded during the 1990 World Cup in Italy. Ireland played Egypt in a group stage match. The game was boring and scrappy. Ireland won, but the football was terrible to watch. Dunphy was commentating live on television, and his frustration boiled over. He threw his pen down in disgust while the cameras were rolling. He called Ireland's style agricultural, basically saying they played like farmers, not footballers. It was a brutal insult broadcast to the entire nation. Jack Charlton didn't take the criticism quietly. At a press conference soon after, Jack refused to even acknowledge Dunphy's questions. Then he looked directly at the cameras and called Dunphy a bitter little man. It was a direct personal attack. Jack made it clear he had no respect for Dunphy's opinion and no interest in defending his tactics to critics. The Irish public had to choose sides. On one hand, you had Dunphy, an intelligent analyst who wanted Ireland to play better football. On the other hand, you had Jack Charlton, who was actually winning games and taking Ireland to places they'd never been before. The public chose Jack overwhelmingly. Fans turned on Dunphy with shocking aggression. When Dunphy arrived at Dublin Airport after the World Cup, angry supporters actually tried to flip his car over. The hatred was real and dangerous. Liam Brady represented everything that critics like Dunphy loved. Brady was an artist with the football. He had played for Arsenal and Juventus, two of Europe's biggest clubs. He was known for skillful passing, creative midfield play, and technical excellence. He was the kind of player who made football look effortless and beautiful. But Jack Charlton had no use for that kind of player in his system. The clash between Brady and Charlton came to a head in 1989. Ireland was playing a friendly match against West Germany. Brady started the game, expecting to play the full 90 minutes like usual. But Jack had other ideas. Before half-time, Jack made the decision to substitute Brady off. Taking off a player before half-time is incredibly rare and deeply humiliating. It sends a clear message that the player has been so bad that the manager can't even wait until half-time to get him off the pitch. Brady was furious. He felt that Jack had discarded him like garbage. At half-time, the two men had a heated argument in the dressing room. Brady couldn't understand why Jack would embarrass him like that in front of his teammates and the crowd. Jack didn't care about Brady's feelings. He cared about playing his system his way. If Brady couldn't fit into that system, then Brady had to go. That was the end of Liam Brady's international career. He never played for Ireland again. He missed the magical journey of the 1990 World Cup, where Ireland reached the quarter-finals and the whole nation celebrated. Brady had to watch from home while Ireland achieved success using the very tactics he despised. It must have been incredibly painful for one of Ireland's most talented players to be cast aside so brutally. Jack's decision to get rid of Brady sent a clear message to every other player in the squad. It didn't matter how talented you were, or what you'd achieved in your club career. If you didn't buy into Jack's philosophy completely, you were out. There was no room for discussion or compromise. Jack's way was the only way. Roy Keane was different from Liam Brady. Keane wasn't a technical artist. He was a tough, aggressive midfielder who loved to win. But Keane was also intelligent and demanded respect from his managers. He had played under Brian Clough at Nottingham Forest, one of the smartest managers in football history. Keane knew what good coaching looked like, and he didn't think Jack Charlton measured up. Keane later admitted that his relationship with Jack was virtually non-existent. He described Jack as being like a big, grumpy uncle. Keane thought Jack was cunning, but not particularly smart about football. Keane had learned from Brian Clough, who was astute and capable of detailed analysis. In Keane's view, merely blustered his way through. Jack's motto was, "Play it as I see it," meaning players had to follow his vision. Clough's motto was, "Play it as you see it," meaning players had freedom to make decisions. Keane knew which approach he preferred. The relationship between Keane and Charlton exploded in 1992 during a tournament in Boston. Keane and another player, Steve Staunton, had been drinking the night before a match. The next morning, they were late to the team bus. Jack was furious and berated both players in front of the team. Most players would have apologised and accepted the punishment. Roy Keane did not. Instead of apologising, Keane challenged Jack directly. He asked why Jack didn't just leave without them if they were late. He said he never asked Jack to wait for them. It was a bold, defiant response that questioned Jack's authority completely. Keane later claimed that Jack backed off immediately. Keane believed Jack was a bully who didn't like it when someone stood up to him. The confrontation showed that Jack's old-school approach to discipline didn't work on everyone. The situation got worse when team captain Mick McCarthy tried to defend Jack and calm things down. Keane turned on McCarthy and delivered a crude, angry response. The incident created bad blood between Keane and McCarthy that would last for years. A decade later, Keane and McCarthy would have an even bigger fight in Saipan before the 2002 World Cup, a fight that would end Keane's international career. The seeds of that disaster were planted back in Boston in 1992 under Jack Charlton's watch. After the Boston incident, Jack's management team forced Keane to participate in a press conference. The purpose was to show the media that everything was fine and there was no conflict within the team. Keane hated it. He felt he was being used in a charade to cover up the real problems. He resented having to pretend everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. Now here's where we need you to take action. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about football history and the real stories behind the legends. Hit that like button right now. Share this video with any football fans you know. And subscribe if you haven't already. We're bringing you the stories that other channels won't tell. Jack Charlton's time as Ireland's manager ended in January 1996. He had taken the team to incredible heights. At one point, Ireland was ranked 6th in the world by FIFA, an unthinkable achievement for such a small nation. He had beaten England, Italy, and Brazil. He had brought joy to millions of Irish people during tough economic times. The feuds that defined Jack's life came from the same personality traits that made him successful. He was loyal to his vision and refused to compromise. He didn't care about criticism or public opinion when he believed he was right. He valued results over relationships. These qualities helped him win trophies and change nations, but they also left him isolated and estranged from people who should have been closest to him. Looking back at Jack Charlton's life, we see a man of contradictions. He was a World Cup winner who feuded with his fellow World Cup winning brother for decades. He was Ireland's greatest manager who drove away some of Ireland's most talented players. He was beloved by millions, but despised by those who worked closest with him. He achieved remarkable success while leaving a trail of broken relationships behind him. The tragedy of the Charlton brothers stands out above all other feuds. Two men who shared the greatest moment in English football history couldn't share a normal family relationship. They let pride and stubbornness destroy something precious. By the time they partially reconciled, it was almost too late. And then dementia took them both, a cruel final chapter that placed them on equal footing in suffering. Jack Charlton died in July 2020 at the age of 85. The outpouring of love from Ireland was enormous. Thousands of people shared memories of where they were when Ireland beat England or reached the World Cup quarter-finals. They remembered the joy and pride Jack had given them. In death, Jack was remembered as a legend and a hero. But the complete story of Jack Charlton includes the feuds, the conflicts, and the people he hurt along the way. Bobby Charlton, forced to choose between his mother and his wife. Roy Keane, disrespected and forced into fake press conferences. Liam Brady, humiliated and discarded before his time. Eamon Dunphy, attacked for expressing honest opinions. These stories matter too. Jack Charlton was a giant of football who stood tall in 2 countries. He won the biggest prize in the sport and changed a nation's sporting culture forever. But he was also a man whose refusal to compromise cost him dearly in personal relationships. His legacy is both inspiring and cautionary. He shows us that you can achieve greatness and still leave wounds that never fully heal. Jack Charlton's life was extraordinary, complicated, and unforgettable. The feuds he fought were as much a part of his story as the trophies he won.
Once more, this team wants a piece of banana. Good luck. I tell you, I would love it if Keegan just said and Keegan's got taps off.
Like he said about Leeds, and when you do things like that about a man like Stuart Pearce, I've kept really quiet, but I'll tell you something. He went down in my estimation when he said that. We have not...
A football icon who won the European Cup and became European Footballer of the Year twice. But his professional life was defined by something else entirely. Intense, explosive confrontations that often ended in sudden, dramatic exits. These weren't just disagreements. They were physical fights, psychological battles, and legal wars over professional ethics. Today, we're diving into 5 of Kevin Keegan's most defining rivalries, conflicts that shaped his entire career and revealed the true nature of a man who could never compromise his beliefs. Let's start with the moment that showed everyone just how raw and impulsive he could be. The 1974 FA Charity Shield at Wembley. Liverpool versus Leeds. Keegan versus Billy Bremner. This wasn't just a football match. It was a war. The rivalry between Liverpool and Leeds was already legendary by this point. Both teams represented different philosophies of English football. Liverpool's flowing passing game against Leeds' physical, uncompromising approach. Bremner embodied everything about Leeds' aggressive style. He was their captain, their enforcer, their heart. And on that August afternoon, he had one target in mind, Kevin Keegan. Bremner had been targeting Keegan all afternoon with brutal physical challenges, kicking him repeatedly, pushing every button he could find. The provocation was relentless and calculated. Bremner knew exactly what he was doing. He was testing Keegan's limits, seeing how much the Liverpool star could endure before breaking. There's only so much anyone can take. Eventually, Keegan snapped. Both players were sent off by the referee in the 60th minute, but Keegan's reaction to the dismissal revealed everything about his character. He ripped his shirt off and threw it to the ground in pure rage. Bremner did the same. It was an unprecedented display of defiance and fury at Wembley, the home of English football. The symbolism was powerful. 2 of the game's biggest names rejecting authority in the most public way possible. This public meltdown led to serious consequences. Both players received an 11-game suspension and a £500 fine each. These punishments were incredibly harsh for that era. Some in football doubted whether the FA Disciplinary Committee even had the competence to hand down such severe sanctions. But the FA was cracking down on rising violence in football, and they needed examples. Keegan and Bremner, 2 high-profile stars, became those examples. Fame wouldn't protect them. The message was clear. On-field violence would no longer be tolerated, regardless of reputation or status. This early incident set a pattern. Keegan reacting impulsively to what he saw as injustice, losing control in explosive, visible ways. A pattern that would haunt him throughout his managerial career. The Bremner clash demonstrated Keegan's low tolerance for sustained physical provocation and his inability to maintain composure when pushed beyond his limits. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us which football manager you think has the best composure under pressure. Now, back to the story. 3 years later, in 1977, another conflict emerged. this time with teammate Jimmy Case. There's a famous rumour that still circulates today. The story goes that Keegan's transfer to Hamburg was triggered by a punch-up with Case after the FA Cup final, leaving Keegan with a black eye. It's dramatic, it's sensational, it's completely false. Jimmy Case himself denied the whole thing. He said it was just a rumour that started on the number 86 bus to Penny Lane. The idea that he punched Keegan before the European Cup final was based on what others thought he might do, not reality. Case's reputation as a hard man meant people assumed he'd react violently to any perceived slight, but the reality was far more mundane. So what actually happened? The morning after Liverpool won the European Cup final in Rome, Keegan did get a black eye, but it wasn't from a punch. It was an accident during playful roughhousing near the hotel pool. Phil Neal's elbow caught him by mistake. Nothing sinister at all. The Liverpool players were celebrating their greatest triumph, letting off steam after the intense pressure of the final. In the chaos and excitement of that celebration, accidents happen. The truth about Keegan's transfer is even simpler. He'd made a deal with Liverpool chairman John Smith a full year earlier. The agreement was clear. The 1976-77 season would be his last at Anfield, and the club would sell him for a fixed fee of £500,000. He'd already confirmed his departure and even celebrated it in the early hours of May 26, 1977, after winning the European Cup. The transfer to Hamburg was a carefully planned professional move, not an impulsive escape from conflict. Keegan wanted a new challenge. He wanted to prove himself in a different league, a different country, a different football culture. The punch-up myth persisted because the media preferred a dramatic personal feud over a simple professional decision. The public wanted conflict. They wanted betrayal. The truth was boring by comparison. This shows how Keegan's high-profile persona often shaped public narratives more than actual facts. His celebrity status meant every decision was scrutinised and often sensationalised. Liverpool moved on quickly anyway. When Keegan returned to Anfield later that year with Hamburg, Liverpool demolished them 6-0 in the European Super Cup. Case even got an assist in that thrashing. The message was clear. Liverpool didn't need Kevin Keegan. They had Kenny Dalglish now. Now we move to the conflict that defined Keegan's managerial career. His rivalry with Manchester United boss Sir Alex Ferguson during the 1995-96 Premier League title race. Keegan's Newcastle team played beautiful attacking football. His philosophy was simple: you score 3 and we'll score 4. It was entertaining, exciting and incredibly naive at the highest level. Newcastle had been clear leaders for a while. Their swashbuckling style had captured the imagination of the entire country. But Manchester United were mounting a comeback. They had experience, ruthlessness, and most importantly, they had Sir Alex Ferguson. Ferguson was a master of psychological warfare. He knew exactly how to get into opponents' heads. He'd done it countless times before, applying pressure through the media, questioning referees, undermining rivals. The specific mind game that broke Keegan targeted the integrity of opposing teams, especially Leeds United. After a tough match, Ferguson publicly questioned the commitment of Leeds players. He suggested they didn't try as hard against other top teams as they did against Manchester United. Ferguson's exact words were brutal. He said he couldn't understand the Leeds players. He fully supported their manager, who didn't deserve players like that. If they'd played like that all season, they'd be near the top. They only raised their game because they were playing Manchester United. It was pathetic. Keegan saw this comment as a direct attack on Newcastle. Ferguson was implying that weaker teams would intentionally put in less effort when playing Newcastle compared to when they played the league leaders. This undermined the legitimacy of Newcastle's victories and their entire title challenge. It suggested Newcastle's position was built on luck and favourable treatment rather than merit. For Keegan, who believed absolutely in the fairness of competition, this was intolerable. Ferguson's strategy was brilliant because it targeted Keegan's core weakness, his passionate, absolute belief in the fairness and integrity of the competition. Ferguson had successfully replaced physical provocation with verbal and ethical provocation. Keegan's response was just as explosive as his reaction to Bremner 2 decades earlier. He still couldn't restrain his immediate emotional defence, even with a title on the line. The outburst happened live on television after Newcastle's hard-fought victory over Leeds United. Keegan's famous tirade, "I will love it if we beat them. Love it." It was a moment of pure, unfiltered emotional release. His face was red, his voice shaking with emotion. He was a man on the edge, publicly unravelling under the pressure. The consequences were immediate and devastating. The highly publicised rant confirmed to Ferguson that he'd successfully broken his rival. Newcastle's team and manager were distracted during the crucial final fixtures. The psychological damage was done. Manchester United won their remaining games comfortably. Newcastle drew their last 2 matches. They finished 4 points behind United. The title was lost. Ferguson had used the pressure of the title race to shatter Keegan's control. It proved the power of psychological strategy over raw emotional passion in modern football. Keegan's honesty and emotion, traits that made him beloved by fans, became his greatest vulnerability against a calculating opponent. Fast forward to 2008, Keegan's second spell as Newcastle manager. This conflict was different. It moved beyond emotion and sporting rivalry into a battle over managerial professional integrity. Dennis Wise had been appointed Executive Director of Football by owner Mike Ashley. Though Keegan initially expressed confidence about working with Wise, tension over player recruitment emerged immediately. The new structure represented everything wrong with modern football: owners and executives making football decisions without proper football knowledge. The dispute centred entirely on one player, Uruguayan midfielder Ignacio Gonzalez. Wise urged Keegan to sign him. Keegan found no substantial professional reference to the player online. The details of his prior loan at Monaco were unimpressive. Then the club's actions became truly disrespectful. Wise told Keegan to search for the player on YouTube. The only clips Keegan found were poor quality videos that provided no proper basis for signing a player to a Premier League club. Even more shocking, no one at the club had ever actually seen the player play, not one person. This was professional negligence on a staggering scale. Despite Keegan making his very strong objections clear to Wise, Vice President Tony Jimenez, and owner Mike Ashley, the club went ahead anyway. They signed Gonzalez on loan on August 31st, 2008. The club's justification was astonishing. They called it a commercial deal. The loan was a favour to 2 influential South American agents who would then look favourably on the club in the future. This transaction cost the club nearly £1 million in wages for a player not expected to play for the first team. It provided rare, concrete evidence of non-footballing interests dictating Premier League transfer policy. The grimmest whisperings about how football really works were suddenly exposed. For Keegan, this was a fundamental violation of his contract and his professional mandate. Signing a player based on poor quality video footage to satisfy a commercial interest against his strong professional objection crossed every line. He resigned immediately on principle. Keegan then lodged a claim for constructive dismissal. In October 2009, an independent arbitration panel found unequivocally in his favour. He was constructively dismissed by Newcastle United. The panel declared that removing control of transfer policy from Keegan and handing it to Dennis Wise constituted constructive dismissal. The club's counterclaim for breach of contract was rejected. Keegan was awarded £2 million plus interest. But the real significance was the legal precedent. The panel ruled that even when not explicitly written in a manager's contract, managers have the right to a final say on transfers. This validated Keegan's stand completely. The traditional authority of the manager over first-team recruitment was now an implied contractual right that couldn't be stripped away and given to a director of football. This decision had massive ramifications for English football, particularly clubs employing a director of football. It legally solidified the manager's primacy in technical matters. Unlike the emotional rage against Bremner or the psychological collapse against Ferguson, the Wise dispute was fought and won through steadfast legal defence of professional ethics. But not all of Keegan's conflicts ended in vindication. His most painful personal rift involved Alan Shearer, the striker he'd signed for a world record £15 million in July 1996. Keegan persuaded Shearer to join his hometown club despite interest from Manchester United. The partnership started with huge mutual ambition. But just 6 months later, Keegan abruptly resigned from his 10-year contract in January 1997. He said he'd taken the club as far as he could. This sudden departure, caused by his inability to manage the intense, prolonged pressure of the title challenge, was seen as betrayal. Those closest to Shearer felt deeply let down. The manager had abandoned the project so soon after Shearer had committed his entire career to Keegan's vision. The personal strain intensified almost a decade later. Keegan failed to attend Shearer's testimonial match against Celtic in May 2006. Keegan was on a family holiday in the United States and chose not to fly back. While Shearer never publicly criticised him, he privately admitted disappointment. The man who paid a world record fee to sign him didn't attend one of the most emotional and significant nights of his professional life. He didn't even contribute a tribute to the match programme. Keegan defended his decision on rational grounds. He argued he wouldn't have expected Shearer to fly across the Atlantic for his own testimonial. This revealed a blind spot in Keegan's personal management, a failure to grasp the symbolic and emotional importance of such gestures. When Keegan returned to Newcastle in 2008, he attempted reconciliation. Shearer ultimately declined a coaching role. He stated explicitly that there was only room for one strong personality at the club. They were too similar, both opinionated and single-minded. The personal friction had evolved into irreconcilable professional incompatibility. The rift that started with Keegan's impulsive 1997 walkout and worsened with the 2006 snub could never be repaired. Kevin Keegan's career was defined by his unyielding commitment to passion and principle. These 5 conflicts trace a clear pattern: physical, impulsive rage against Bremner that led to severe punishment, a fabricated myth with Case that showed how media narratives could overshadow truth, an emotional televised collapse against Ferguson where psychological warfare cost him a title, a painful personal estrangement from Shearer caused by impulsive professional abandonment, and finally, a principled legal battle against Wise that resulted in landmark vindication. His volatility cost him dearly: the 1996 title, his relationship with Shearer, but that same character also secured a vital legal victory that reshaped English football. The 2009 arbitration ruling affirmed managers possess an implied contractual right to final say on transfers. It imposed limits on the director of football role and provided critical leverage to managers against powerful, non-footballing executives. Kevin Keegan's professional life was a series of volatile clashes driven by principle. While this led to painful losses, it was also the source of moral strength that cemented his legacy. Not just as King Kev, the footballing legend, but as an uncompromising defender of managerial professional integrity. His core principles were both his greatest weakness and his greatest strength. If you enjoyed this deep dive into football's most explosive manager, smash that like button and let us know in the comments which football rivalry you want us to cover next. I have no respect for him. Those were George Best's own words about Sir Bobby Charlton. And it was a hatred that would end up destroying Manchester United. Best was the superstar of the swinging 60s, a player with talent nobody could match. He was part of the United Trinity alongside Dennis Law and Bobby Charlton, the 3 men who brought Manchester United their first European Cup in 1968. That same year, Best won the Ballon d'Or, joining Law and Charlton as winners of football's biggest individual prize. But underneath all that glory, George Best's career was built on conflict. His fights with teammates, referees and opponents were not accident. They were the result of a man who could not control himself, and they would tear apart everything he had built. The biggest fight was with Bobby Charlton. These 2 men hated each other, and their hatred killed the team. Charlton was born in 1937 and believed in the old ways. He wanted short haircuts, club blazers, and respect for authority. He hated the new youth culture and complained about young people using slang like cool and gas. Charlton thought it was sad that young people did not want to be close with older people because they thought it was square. Best saw things differently. He said Charlton represented the past while he represented the future of Manchester United. Best was glad he was born in 1946 and not 1926. He could not stand Charlton's strict behaviour. Best said Charlton had a holier-than-thou attitude and wished he could hear Charlton say a curse word just once. This was not just a small disagreement. By the early 1970s, these two legends were so angry at each other that they stopped speaking on the field. They would not even pass the ball to each other. The team's best players were sabotaging their own tactics because of personal hatred. The problems got worse after Matt Busby retired as manager in 1969. Busby had been like a father figure who kept everyone together. When he left, there was nobody to control the tension between Best and Charlton. The team was already getting older and weaker. Charlton was 31 years old and past his best years. Denis Law was 29 and had not fully recovered from a serious knee injury. Best was only 22 but had already won his last major trophy. Without Busby's leadership, the small arguments between Best and Charlton turned into a full-team disaster. Charlton was the team captain and felt trapped in the middle of the chaos. He was supposed to lead the team, but everything was falling apart around him. Charlton later tried to explain the feud by saying it was natural because they were different ages and lived different lives. He said he did not go to nightclubs or drink heavily like Best. Charlton suggested that Best listened to the wrong type of people. This comment showed that Charlton still believed he was morally better than Best. But this attitude was exactly what made Best so angry. Best did not just disagree with Charlton about football. He disagreed with everything Charlton stood for. Best wanted freedom and excitement. Charlton wanted rules and tradition. These two views could not exist together. If you think this story is crazy, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us which feud shocked you the most. We need to hear from you. The hatred between Best and Charlton reached its peak on September 18, 1972, at Charlton's testimonial match against Celtic. Best refused to play. He said he had an ankle injury at first, but later admitted that playing would have been fake given how he felt about Charlton. But Best did not just stay home. He showed up to the match, watched for 5 minutes, then left to go to the Brown Bull pub. There, he spent the night drinking and throwing darts. Then he did something unbelievable. He threw 24 eggs at a portrait of Charlton hanging on the wall. This was not a private insult. This was a public attack on everything Charlton represented. Best was making his choice clear. He wanted Manchester United to be a modern, celebrity-driven club, not the traditional, disciplined team that Charlton loved. The conflict between Best and Charlton also showed a bigger problem with Manchester United's identity. Best was different from the rest of the team in major ways, while other players stayed connected to their working-class roots and lived in Manchester. Best chased the high-rolling lifestyle of London. He went to fancy restaurants and expensive nightclubs in the capital city. He surrounded himself with celebrities and models. The other players, even when they became successful, still stayed close to Manchester and kept their local connections. Best did not fit in with this rooted identity. The club had to choose between two different futures. They could stay traditional and local like Charlton wanted, or they could become a global celebrity brand like Best represented. The egg-throwing incident was Best's way of voting for his vision and insulting the old way. Denis Law was caught in the middle of this war. Law was the third member of the Trinity, debuting with Best and Charlton on January 18, 1964, in a game where all three scored. Law won the Ballon d'Or in 1964 and was one of the best British players ever. He tried to stay out of the fight between Best and Charlton. Law focused on playing football. He praised Charlton's powerful shots and said he scored many goals by following up after the goalkeeper could not hold Charlton's strikes. Law said he got a lot of his goals from Bobby by being ready near the goalkeeper. Law did not talk much about the feud. He just wanted to play. His silence was a strategy to keep working relationships based on talent alone. But his silence could not fix the problem. Since Best and Charlton would not speak or pass to each other, the team's tactics fell apart. Law was a victim of their hatred. His skills could not make up for the fact that his two partners refused to work together. The team's core tactical engine was permanently destroyed. By 1969, Law was physically weak and never fully recovered from his knee injury. Charlton was aging and slowing down. The fighting between Best and Charlton made the physical decline even worse. The irony was that other teams still feared the Trinity. Liverpool manager Bill Shankly would remove models of Best, Law and Charlton from his team's practice board before playing Manchester United. He would put them in his pocket and tell his players not to worry because they could not play at all. This showed that opponents still saw the Trinity as a major threat. But inside Manchester United, the partnership was already dead. Best also had major problems with authority. In December 1969, during a League Cup match against Manchester City, Best got a booking he thought was unfair. Manchester City also got a penalty he thought was wrong. As Best and referee Jack Taylor walked off the field, Best knocked the ball out of Taylor's hands. Taylor was an important official who would later referee the 1974 World Cup final. He reported this to the Football Association. The FA gave Best a 1-month suspension. Best believed the punishment was too harsh. He said the FA was punishing him not just for what he did on the field, but because they hated his playboy lifestyle. The FA wanted to make an example out of Best. They wanted to show that they controlled player behaviour, even when players were off the field. The punishment was about much more than knocking a ball away. It was about enforcing traditional morality. The FA was trying to impose the same values that Charlton believed in. This created a cultural fight between Best and the football establishment. The FA saw Best's lifestyle as a threat to the sport's traditional values. His gambling, drinking, and relationships with women were all over the newspapers. The public was divided. Some people loved Best and saw him as exciting and modern. Other people hated him and thought he was destroying football. The FA sided with the second group. They used their power to punish Best whenever they could, but Best had an answer. When he came back from suspension, Manchester United played Northampton Town in the FA Cup on February 7, 1970. Best was angry because people had been saying Manchester United was better without him. The team had gone 5 matches without losing while he was banned. Some fans even sent him letters saying the team improved when he was gone. Best scored 6 goals in an 8-2 win. It was his way of proving everyone wrong. He showed the FA and the fans that they needed him. But this moment of brilliance could not hide the bigger problem. Best's lifestyle and the criticism it brought created a cycle. The more he partied and missed training, the more people criticised him. The more they criticised him, the more he rebelled. The attention from the tabloids and the booing from fans fed into each other. The FA used the negative attention around Best to justify harsh punishments. They pointed to public disapproval as proof that they needed to discipline him. Best responded with more rebellion, or, like at Northampton, with amazing performances that made him even more famous. This cycle continued throughout his career. External pressure led to institutional punishment. Institutional punishment led to rebellion. Rebellion led to more external pressure. Best was trapped in a pattern he could not escape. Best also had to deal with brutal defenders. In the 1960s, rough play was normal. Defenders were told to hurt star players to stop them from playing well. Before a match against Manchester United, Northampton scouts wrote instructions to attack Bobby Charlton physically. The word they used was nobble, which meant to deliberately injure or disable someone. Best faced this violence constantly. Defenders like Ron Harris and Norman Hunter would kick and chop at him throughout every game. Best was the most elusive attacking player in England, which made him the biggest target. On his debut on September 14, 1963, against West Bromwich Albion, Best faced Graham Williams. His teammates warned him that Williams was a killer, but Best was not scared. He made Williams look foolish by swerving around him. Williams ended up doing a complete circle trying to follow Best's movement. When Williams fought back with angry kicks and hacks, Best just kept playing. He was not intimidated, but surviving required more than just skill. Best needed real toughness. In the 1957 FA Cup final, Peter McParland charged Manchester United's goalkeeper Ray Wood and left him unconscious. This was a late, violent shoulder charge that would be a red card today. But newspapers at the time called it a fair shoulder charge and a pure accident. The press defended McParland and said it was just part of the game. This was the world Best played in. The level of violence he inherited was far beyond modern standards. Manager Matt Busby knew this and made sure training sessions were fierce and sometimes brutal, so Best could handle the rough challenges. Busby deliberately made training violent to prepare Best for what he would face in real matches. Observers noted that Best was tough and durable. He would get kicked and hacked, but he would just get up and keep playing. The irony is that Best's physical toughness came from the traditional football system that he later rejected. Busby's brutal training methods were part of the old-school approach to football. Best benefited from this traditional preparation, but he refused to accept the traditional values that came with it. All of these conflicts took their toll. Best's gambling, drinking, and womanizing led to constant problems. He missed training and skipped matches. The club fined and suspended him many times. His behaviour went against everything the team needed. Fans booed him. His drinking got worse as the pressure increased. When he was drunk, Best became violent. He punched his 15-year-old son. He also punched his wife more than once, and he admitted this in his biography. His personal life was a disaster, and it destroyed his focus on football. The public disgrace attracted even more criticism. The tabloids followed him everywhere. Every night out, every missed training session, every fight was front-page news. The end came in 1974. Manager Tommy Docherty got tired of Best missing training. The final breaking point happened when Docherty dropped Best from the team for an FA Cup match against 3rd Division Plymouth Argyle. Plymouth was a weak team from a lower division. Being dropped for this match was an insult. Best could not believe the manager did not think he was good enough to play against such a weak team. Best was not even listening to Docherty's explanation. The relationship was broken beyond repair. Best left Manchester United at age 27. His career at the top was over. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment about what you think led to Best's downfall. Was it the feuds, the lifestyle, or something else? Let us know. George Best's career went from the top of European football to 10 different clubs across 4 continents. After leaving Manchester United, he drifted through teams in America, Scotland, and Ireland. He never found stability or success again. He ended up broke and died from health problems caused by alcoholism. His fights with Charlton destroyed the team's unity after Busby left. His conflict with Jack Taylor showed how institutions wanted to control him and use him as an example. The rough play he faced required toughness that came from the traditional system he wanted to break away from. Best created a self-fulfilling prophecy. He claimed the FA punished him because they hated his lifestyle. The feud with Charlton was also about attitude and behaviour. By continuing to do exactly what authority figures criticised, Best proved them right. He kept drinking, gambling, and missing commitments. This behaviour validated the criticisms against him. In response, Best rebelled even more. He relied on his celebrity as a shield, but his fame only made things worse. But despite all the chaos and conflict, Best's talent was undeniable. His dribbling was magical. His speed and control were unmatched. He once joked about his downfall, saying he spent a lot of money on booze, girls, and fast cars, and the rest he just wasted. This quote became famous because it captured Best's self-awareness. He knew what he had done to himself. He recognised and owned the destructive nature of his conflicts and indiscipline. Best's story shows what happens when incredible talent crashes into a world that cannot handle it. He was too talented for the traditional system to contain, but too undisciplined to survive without that system's structure. The collision between his genius and the conservative institutions of football led to both iconic status and total collapse. He became famous not just for his skill, but for his rebellion. But this rebellion came with a terrible cost. His career was short. His life after football was tragic. George Best remains one of football's greatest players and greatest tragedies, a man whose genius was matched only by his ability to destroy everything around him. His feuds with Charlton, Taylor, and the football establishment defined his career as much as his talent did. In the end, Best could not escape the conflicts he created. They consumed him and ended his time at the top far too soon.